The November rain hammered against the windows of Rosie's diner like thousands of tiny fists demanding entry. Inside, the fluorescent lights cast their pale glow over red vinyl booths and a black and white checkered floor that had seen better decades. The smell of fresh coffee mingled with bacon grease and pie, a combination that had become as familiar to Sophia Chen as her own heartbeat. "Order up," Jimmy called from the kitchen, his weathered face appearing briefly in the service window. Sophia grabbed the plates with practiced efficiency, balancing them along her left arm while her right hand scooped up the coffee pot. Table 7. 2 burgers, extra pickles, no onions. She'd been doing this for 6 years now, long enough that her body moved through the diner on autopilot, while her mind wandered to more pressing concerns. Rent was due in 5 days. Emma needed new shoes. Her toes were practically poking through the current pair. And there was that letter from the school about the field trip she couldn't afford. "Here you go, gentlemen," Sophia said, setting down the plates with a practiced smile that never quite reached her tired eyes. "Can I get you anything else?" The 2 construction workers shook their heads, already digging into their meals. Sophia moved on, refilling coffee cups along the way, her feet aching in the worn sneakers she really needed to replace. But Emma's shoes came first. They always came first. In the corner booth near the back, 7-year-old Emma Chen sat with her homework spread across the table. Her dark hair was pulled into a slightly messy ponytail, and she chewed on the end of her pencil as she puzzled over a math problem. A half-eaten grilled cheese sandwich sat on a small plate beside her social studies textbook. "How's the homework going, sweetheart?" Sophia asked, pausing at her daughter's booth. Emma looked up with those big brown eyes that melted Sophia's heart every single time. "I'm stuck on number 12. It doesn't make sense." Sophia glanced at the clock. 7:45. Another hour and 15 minutes until her shift ended. Then she'd help Emma with the homework at their small apartment 3 blocks away. "Keep trying, baby. I know you can figure it out. You're so smart." Emma nodded, returning her attention to the page, and Sophia felt the familiar tug of guilt. Her daughter shouldn't be spending every evening in a diner booth, waiting for her mother's shift to end. She should be at home, playing, being a kid. But daycare was expensive, and Sophia's mother lived 2 states away. This was the best she could do. The door chimed, and Sophia looked up to see old Mr. Peterson shuffling in from the rain, shaking droplets from his jacket. She grabbed a menu and guided him to his usual spot by the window. "Evening, Mr. Peterson." "The usual?" "You know me too well, Sophia," he said with a gentle smile. "And a slice of that apple pie if Jimmy hasn't sold out yet." "I think we saved you a piece," Sophia replied, jotting down the order. "Coffee coming right up." The evening continued its steady rhythm. Customers came and went, leaving tips that Sophia carefully tucked into her apron pocket. Every dollar counted. Every quarter mattered. She'd learned to survive on the mathematics of scarcity, calculating and recalculating how to stretch each paycheck just a little further. At 8:30, the dinner rush had faded to just a handful of customers. Mr. Peterson sat reading his newspaper. A young couple occupied a booth near the front, their heads close together in quiet conversation. Emma had moved on to reading a library book, having apparently given up on math problem number 12. Then the door chimed again. Sophia was refilling Mr. Peterson's coffee when she heard the sound, but something about the quality of silence that followed made her look up. The young couple had stopped talking. Even Jimmy had gone quiet in the kitchen. The man who entered moved with a quiet confidence that seemed to command the very air around him. He was tall, perhaps 6'2", with dark hair graying at the temples and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. He wore an expensive charcoal suit despite the late hour, and raindrops glistened on his shoulders like diamonds. His eyes, dark and penetrating, swept across the diner with the assessing gaze of someone who always knew where the exits were. Vincent Romano. Sophia recognized him immediately, though they'd never been formally introduced. Everyone in this neighborhood knew who Vincent Romano was, even if they pretended not to. You didn't live 4 blocks from his territory without learning to recognize the man who controlled it. He came to Rosie's diner every Thursday night at 8:30, had been doing so for the past 3 months. He always sat in the same booth, the one near the back, diagonal from where Emma did her homework. He always ordered black coffee and occasionally a slice of whatever pie was available. He never caused trouble, he always left a generous tip, and he always came alone. Sophia had served him twice before when the other waitress, Marie, had been out sick. Both times the exchange had been brief and professional. He'd said thank you in a voice that was surprisingly soft for a man of his reputation. She'd said, "You're welcome," and moved on as quickly as possible. Tonight, Marie was here, so Sophia returned her attention to Mr. Peterson's coffee, grateful she wouldn't have to make small talk with Vincent Romano. Except Marie was in the back, taking her break. "Sophia," Jimmy called from the kitchen, his voice tight. "Table 4. Table 4. Vincent's table." Sophia took a breath, grabbed her order pad, and approached the booth where Vincent had settled himself. He was looking out the rain-streaked window, his profile sharp and unreadable. "Good evening," Sophia said, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her stomach. "What can I get for you tonight?" Vincent turned to look at her, and for a moment she saw something flicker in those dark eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or simple acknowledgement. "Coffee. Black. And what's the pie tonight?" "We have apple and cherry." "Apple. Thank you." Sophia wrote down the order, though she didn't really need to. As she turned to go, Vincent spoke again. "Your daughter, she's here most nights?" Sophia froze, her protective instincts immediately flaring. She turned back slowly. "Yes, I hope that's not a problem." Vincent shook his head slightly. "No problem. Just an observation. She's well behaved." "Thank you," Sophia said carefully, uncertain how to navigate this unexpected conversation. She knows how to stay out of the way. Something that might have been sadness passed across Vincent's face. There and gone so quickly, Sophia thought she might have imagined it. "Good student, I imagine." "Very good," Sophia replied, her voice warming despite herself. It was impossible not to feel pride when talking about Emma. "She's reading 2 grades above her level." Vincent nodded, then looked back out the window, clearly done with the conversation. Sophia hurried to the kitchen, her heart beating faster than it should. "That man gives me the creeps," Jimmy muttered, sliding the pie onto a plate. "I wish he'd find another diner." "He's never caused any trouble," Sophia said, surprising herself by defending Vincent Romano. "And his money spends just like anyone else's." Jimmy grunted but said nothing more. Sophia delivered the coffee and pie, and Vincent accepted them with a quiet, "Thank you," before returning his attention to the window and the rain beyond. The minutes ticked by. 8:45. 8:50. Emma yawned, rubbing her eyes. Soon it would be time to pack up, to make the walk home through the wet streets, to help with the stubborn math problem, to read a bedtime story, to collapse into her own bed for 5 hours before doing it all again. Then the door chimed once more. 2 men entered, and the temperature in the diner seemed to drop 10 degrees. They were both large, broad-shouldered, wearing leather jackets despite the rain. The first had a shaved head and a scar running from his eyebrow to his cheek. The second was younger, with red hair and cold blue eyes. Neither of them looked like they were here for the pie. Sophia's stomach clenched. She recognized them, not by name, but by type. They had the same hard edge she'd seen in some of her late husband's associates back before David died 2 years ago, in a car accident that still didn't quite add up. The men's eyes found her immediately, and the bald one smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "Sophia Chen," he said, his voice carrying across the diner. It wasn't a question. Sophia set down the coffee pot carefully, her hands beginning to tremble. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" "Oh, I think you can," the bald man said, walking toward her with deliberate slowness. The redhead followed, flanking her other side. "We need to have a conversation about your late husband's outstanding obligations." The other customers had gone silent. "Mr. Peterson folded his newspaper slowly, his elderly eyes worried. The young couple near the front exchanged glances, clearly debating whether to leave. "I don't know what you're talking about," Sophia said, her voice shakier now. "David's been gone for 2 years. Any debts he had—" "Don't disappear just because someone stops breathing," the bald man interrupted. "Your husband owed our employer a significant amount of money. That debt transfers to his next of kin. That would be you." Sophia's mind raced. David had gambled, she'd known that, had fought with him about it more times than she could count, but he'd promised he'd stopped. He'd promised things would be different. Had he been lying? Had he gotten in deeper than she'd known? "I don't have any money," Sophia said, hating how small her voice sounded. "I work 2 jobs just to keep a roof over my daughter's head. Whatever David owed, I can't isn't really our concern," the redhead spoke up, his accent faintly Irish. "Our employer is a patient man, but his patience has limits. You've got 1 week to come up with $15,000, or we start collecting in other ways." 15,000. Sophia felt dizzy. She didn't have 1,500 in her bank account, let alone 15,000. It might as well have been 15 million. "I can't," she whispered. "Please, you have to understand." The bald man reached out and grabbed her wrist. Not hard enough to bruise, but firm enough to make his point. Then I suggest you figure out how to make it happen. Sell something. Borrow from family. We really don't care how you get it. Let go of me, Sophia said, trying to pull away. Fear was giving way to anger now, hot and bright in her chest. How dare they? How dare David put her in this position even from beyond the grave? We're just having a conversation, the bald man said, his grip tightening slightly. A conversation where you leave with an understanding, the redhead added, moving closer to her other side. 1 week, Sophia. That's more than fair. From the corner booth, Emma had looked up from her book. Sophia could see her daughter's face going pale, her eyes widening with fear. No, not in front of Emma. Whatever happened, Emma couldn't see this, couldn't be part of this. Please, Sophia said again, her voice breaking. Just leave. I'll figure something out. But please just go. Oh, we'll go, the bald man said. But first we need to make sure you really understand how serious this is. His other hand moved to her shoulder, pushing her back against the counter. The redhead stepped closer, blocking her in. Sophia's heart hammered against her ribs. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not now. Not in front of her daughter. Stop, she managed. You're hurting me. Not yet, we're not, the bald man said quietly. But we could arrange a demonstration if that would help you take this more seriously. Sophia saw Emma slide out of the booth. No, baby. Stay there. Stay safe. But Emma wasn't moving toward the door. She was moving forward, into the diner, her small face set with a determination that broke Sophia's heart, even as it filled her with terror. Emma, no, Sophia called out. Stay back, sweetheart. But Emma wasn't listening. Her 7-year-old mind had processed the situation through the simple logic of childhood. Her mother was in trouble, and she needed help. And there, in the back booth, sat the man who came every Thursday. The man her mother said always left good tips. The man who'd asked about her homework that one time. Emma ran. Not toward the door. Not toward safety. She ran straight to Vincent Romano's booth, her small sneakers slapping against the checkered floor. Vincent had been watching the scene unfold with the detached interest of someone observing a situation that didn't concern him. He'd recognized the two men the moment they entered. They worked for Marcus Volkov, a relative newcomer trying to establish territory in the city. Low-level enforcers, not particularly bright, but loyal and mean enough to be useful. The woman's debt wasn't his business. Volkov's territorial expansion wasn't his immediate concern. Vincent had come for coffee and pie, not to get involved in disputes that didn't affect his interests. Then the child ran toward him. Before Vincent could process what was happening, small fingers wrapped around his hand, his right hand the one resting on the table next to his coffee cup. The grip was surprisingly strong for such a tiny person. Emma Chen looked up at him with eyes swimming with tears, her breath coming in frightened gasps. Please, she said, her voice high and desperate. They are attacking my mother. Please help her. Time seemed to slow. Vincent looked down at the child, really looked at her, and saw terror and hope warring in her expression. She believed he would help. This small person who didn't know who he was, who couldn't possibly understand what she was asking, believed with absolute conviction that he would make things right. When had anyone last looked at him like that? When had anyone last believed he would help simply because it was the right thing to do? Vincent's gaze moved from Emma to Sophia, pinned against the counter by two of Volkov's men. She was shaking, her face pale with fear, but her eyes were on her daughter, not on herself, not on her attackers, but on the child who'd just run to a stranger for help. Something shifted in Vincent's chest. Something he'd thought had died years ago, buried alongside a daughter who would have been about Emma's age if she'd lived. He stood up. The movement was fluid, unhurried, but somehow it commanded attention. The two enforcers looked over and Vincent saw the exact moment they recognized him. The bald one's eyes widened. The redhead actually took a step back. Gentlemen, Vincent said, his voice quiet but carrying effortlessly across the diner. You're in the wrong establishment. The bald man released Sophia's wrist immediately, his cocky demeanor evaporating like steam. Mr. Romano, we didn't realize. We're just collecting on a legitimate debt. From Marcus Volkov? Vincent asked, taking a step forward. Emma's hand was still in his and somehow he found himself leading her gently back toward her mother. Marcus is collecting debts in my neighborhood now? This is neutral territory, the redhead said, though his voice lacked conviction. The diner's not under anyone's protection. Vincent's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop another 10 degrees. Is that so? And yet here I am, every Thursday night. Funny how Marcus never mentioned he'd be conducting business here. The two men exchanged glances. They were caught in a delicate position. Leave empty-handed and look weak to their employer, or push back against Vincent Romano and risk something far worse than looking weak. Vincent reached Sophia's side and gently released Emma's hand, positioning himself between the child and the two enforcers. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Any debts involving residents of this neighborhood should be cleared through the proper channels. I'm sure Marcus would agree. It was phrased as a statement, but everyone in the diner understood it as an order. The bald man's jaw worked, clearly struggling with the decision. Finally, he nodded stiffly. We'll need to discuss this with our employer. You do that, Vincent said, and tell Marcus I'll be expecting his call. We should have a conversation about territorial boundaries and professional courtesy. The redhead was already moving toward the door. The bald man followed, but not before shooting one last look at Sophia, a promise that this wasn't over. Then they were gone, the door chiming cheerfully behind them as if nothing had happened. The silence that followed was deafening. Sophia immediately dropped to her knees, pulling Emma into a fierce hug. Baby, are you okay? You should never have. That was so dangerous. But he helped, Mommy, Emma said, her voice muffled against Sophia's shoulder. I knew he would help. Sophia looked up at Vincent, still kneeling on the floor with her daughter in her arms. Tears were streaming down her face now. Fear, relief, gratitude all mixed together. Thank you. I don't know how to... Thank you. Vincent stood still, uncertain. He'd built an empire on certainty, on always knowing the right move, the right words, but this, a crying woman and a child who'd trusted him with pure, innocent faith, this was territory he hadn't navigated in years. You're welcome, he said finally, the words feeling inadequate. Mr. Peterson cleared his throat from his booth. Everything all right, Sophia? Yes, Sophia managed, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Everything's fine now, Mr. Peterson. I'm sorry about the disturbance. The elderly man nodded, exchanging a long look with Vincent before returning to his newspaper. The young couple near the front quietly left, leaving money on their table. Sophia stood, keeping Emma close against her side. I need to... She seemed unable to finish a sentence, her mind clearly still processing what had just happened. You should sit down, Vincent said, gesturing to the nearest booth. Catch your breath. Sophia nodded numbly and slid into the booth, pulling Emma onto her lap. Her daughter wrapped her arms around her neck and buried her face in her mother's shoulder. Vincent stood there for a moment, then made a decision that would change all of their lives, though he didn't know it yet. He sat down across from them. Tell me about the debt, he said quietly. Sophia looked up, her eyes red but drying. I don't even know if it's real. David, my husband, he had a problem. He liked to make bets he couldn't afford, but he died 2 years ago. I thought all of that was behind us. 15,000 is a significant amount, Vincent observed. That's not from casual betting. I don't know where it came from, Sophia said helplessly. David kept that part of his life separate from me. I'd find out about the debts when men would show up at the door, or when our utilities got shut off because he'd gambled away the bill money. But I thought when he died, her voice broke. I thought we were finally free. Emma lifted her head. Daddy's debts followed us? Sophia's expression crumbled. I don't know, sweetheart. I hope not. Vincent studied them both. The woman was clearly telling the truth. She had no money, no resources, no way to pay what Volkov claimed she owed. The child was innocent, caught in circumstances she couldn't possibly understand. Neither of them should have been drawn into the ugly world of debts and collection, and yet they had been. And now Vincent found himself involved, whether he'd intended to be or not. Marcus Volkov is new to the city, Vincent said, thinking out loud. He's been pushing boundaries, testing to see what he can get away with. This debt might be legitimate or it might be fabricated as an excuse to lean on vulnerable people. What do I do? Sophia asked, her voice small. I can't pay $15,000. I can barely keep up with rent. Vincent was quiet for a long moment. The smart move would be to walk away. He'd scared off the enforcers for tonight, made his point about territorial respect. Getting further involved would create complications he didn't need. But Emma was looking at him with those trusting eyes, and Sophia was holding her daughter like she was the only good thing left in a world that had taken so much from her, and Vincent thought of another little girl with dark hair who used to look at him like he could fix anything. I'll look into it, Vincent heard himself say. Find out if the debt is real, and if so, where it came from. In the meantime, those men won't come back here. Not to this diner. Sophia's eyes widened. Why would you do that? You don't even know us. Vincent looked at Emma, then back at Sophia. Your daughter asked me for help. I'm not in the habit of ignoring such requests. It was a partial truth. The full truth was more complicated, tangled up in grief and memory and a sudden, unexpected desire to be the person this child believed him to be. Sophia's eyes filled with tears again. I don't know how to thank you. Focus on your daughter, Vincent said, standing. Keep your normal routine, but be aware of your surroundings. If those men or anyone else approaches you, call me immediately. He pulled a business card from his wallet. Plain white, just a phone number, no name. He set it on the table between them. Sophia picked up the card with shaking fingers. I will. Thank you. Really, thank you so much. Emma wiggled out of her mother's lap and stood beside the booth, looking up at Vincent with solemn eyes. Are you a good guy? The question caught him off guard. Vincent crouched down so he was at eye level with the child. That's a complicated question, Emma. I'm someone who keeps his word. Is that good enough? Emma considered this with the seriousness only a 7-year-old could muster. Then she nodded. Yes, thank you for helping my mommy. You're welcome, Vincent said, and found that he meant it. He stood, left money on his original table for the coffee and pie he hadn't finished, and walked toward the door. Behind him, he could hear Sophia talking quietly to Emma, reassuring her, comforting her. Jimmy had emerged from the kitchen, concern written across his weathered face. Vincent stepped out into the rain, letting it soak into his expensive suit. His car was parked a block away, a sleek black sedan that reflected the streetlights in wavering lines. His driver, Tony, straightened from where he'd been leaning against the hood. Everything all right, boss? No, Vincent said, climbing into the back seat. But it will be. Call Michael. Tell him I need everything he can find on Marcus Volkov's recent activities. And find out what he knows about a man named David Chen, deceased approximately 2 years. Tony nodded and pulled out his phone as he slid behind the wheel. The car pulled smoothly into traffic, windshield wipers beating a steady rhythm against the November rain. Vincent looked back at the diner as they drove away. Through the rain-streaked window, he could see Sophia and Emma still sitting in the booth, talking. The woman's arms were around her daughter, protective and fierce. He'd made a promise tonight. To a 7-year-old child who'd grabbed his hand and begged for help. To a woman who worked herself to exhaustion to provide for that child. It was the kind of promise that could complicate his carefully ordered world, that could draw him into a conflict he didn't need. But Vincent Romano always kept his word, even when it cost him, especially when it cost him. The rain fell harder as the car disappeared into the night, and in Rosie's diner, Sophia Chen held her daughter close and wondered what she'd just set in motion. The next morning arrived cold and gray, the kind of November day that made the whole city feel wrapped in wet wool. Sophia had barely slept, tossing and turning in her small bedroom while her mind replayed the previous evening's events on an endless loop. The feel of rough hands grabbing her wrist, Emma's terrified face, and most confusing of all, Vincent Romano's unexpected intervention. She'd heard stories about men like him. Everyone in the neighborhood had. He was powerful, respected, feared. Men crossed the street when they saw him coming. Business owners paid for his protection. The police looked the other way when his name came up. Sophia had spent most of her adult life trying to stay as far away from that world as possible, especially after David's problems had shown her how dark it could get. And now she'd taken his business card. Now she was in his debt. The thought made her stomach churn as she poured cereal into Emma's bowl and tried to act like everything was normal. Emma seemed quieter than usual, pushing her Cheerios around with her spoon instead of eating them. Baby, you need to eat something before school, Sophia said gently, sitting down across from her at their small kitchen table. Mommy, are those men going to come back? Emma asked, her voice small. Sophia's heart broke a little. She reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. No, sweetheart. Mr. Romano said they wouldn't, and I believe him. You're safe. We're both safe. But the debt, Emma said, stumbling a little over the unfamiliar word. They said Daddy owed them money. Do we have to pay it? How did you explain this to a 7-year-old? How did you tell your child that her father's mistakes might follow them for years? That the world wasn't always fair? That sometimes bad things happened to good people? I'm going to figure it out, Sophia said, squeezing Emma's hand. That's grown-up stuff, and you don't need to worry about it. Your only job is to be 7 years old and do your homework and be the amazing kid you already are. Okay. Emma nodded slowly, then finally took a bite of cereal. Sophia watched her daughter eat, trying to memorize every detail of this moment. The morning light filtering through their worn curtains, the quiet sound of Emma crunching her breakfast, the simple peace of a normal morning. She had a terrible feeling that normal was about to become very complicated. Across the city, Vincent sat in his study with a file folder spread open on his mahogany desk. Michael had worked quickly, as he always did. The man was worth every penny Vincent paid him. Thorough, discreet, and frighteningly efficient at gathering information. David Chen's file painted a picture of a man who'd made consistently poor choices. He'd started with small bets, sports games, card games with friends. But the betting had escalated over the years, and he'd eventually found himself in debt to several different lenders, including some who operated on the fringes of Vincent's own territory. What caught Vincent's attention, however, was a notation from 18 months before David's death. David had been approached by someone from Marcus Volkov's organization, not for a loan, but for information. David had worked as a bookkeeper for a shipping company, one that handled cargo for various interests, including some that preferred their business remain private. Vincent leaned back in his leather chair, processing the implications. David Chen hadn't just been a gambler, he'd been an informant, and informants who worked for men like Volkov didn't usually live long, peaceful lives. The car accident that killed David suddenly seemed less like an accident and more like a convenient cleanup. And the supposed debt? That was likely fabricated, a way for Volkov to maintain leverage over David's widow, to keep her afraid and isolated in case she knew anything her husband might have shared before his death. It was clever, in a ruthless sort of way. Claim the widow owes money for her dead husband's debts, lean on her periodically to keep her scared and compliant, and if she ever becomes a problem, collect what she owes through other means. Vincent's jaw tightened. He'd built his reputation on a certain code of conduct. Yes, he operated outside the law. Yes, he demanded respect and loyalty from those in his territory, but he didn't target innocent people. He didn't terrorize single mothers and their children. Marcus Volkov apparently had no such scruples. Vincent's phone buzzed. A text from Michael. Volkov wants to meet. Says he has questions about last night. Vincent typed back, set it up. Neutral location. This afternoon. He stood and walked to the window of his study, looking out over the city skyline. The rain had stopped, leaving everything washed clean and glistening. Somewhere out there, Sophia Chen was probably getting ready for another shift at the diner. Emma was heading to school, and both of them were trying to pretend their world hadn't tilted on its axis last night. Vincent had a choice to make. He could meet with Volkov, smooth things over, maybe negotiate a reduced payment plan that Sophia could manage over time, walk away clean, his conscience satisfied that he'd done something. Or he could do what his instincts were telling him to do, put Sophia and Emma under his explicit protection, draw a clear line that Volkov couldn't cross, and deal with whatever consequences came from that decision. The smart move was the first option. The smart move was always the path that avoided unnecessary conflict. Vincent thought of Emma's small hand gripping his, her absolute trust that he would help. He thought of Sophia's exhausted face, her determination to protect her daughter despite being terrified herself. He'd lost his own daughter 5 years ago. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia, the doctors had called it. Just 8 years old when she died, despite the best treatment money could buy. His wife hadn't survived the grief. Not literally, but emotionally. She'd left him a year later, moved across the country, and they hadn't spoken since. Vincent had thrown himself into his work after that, built his empire higher and wider, surrounded himself with power and control, but it had all felt hollow, like eating ashes. He'd stopped feeling much of anything, until a 7-year-old girl grabbed his hand and asked for help. Vincent made his decision. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. Tony, I need you to assign someone to watch over Sophia Chen and her daughter. Discreetly, I don't want them to know he's there. Someone good, someone I trust completely, and have Marco ready the car. I have a meeting this afternoon. Sophia's afternoon shift at the diner was quieter than usual. Word had spread about the previous night's incident. Not the details, but enough that people knew something had happened. Customers cast curious glances her way, and Marie, the other waitress, kept asking if she was okay. I'm fine, Sophia insisted for the 10th time, refilling the coffee station. Really, it was just a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding that had Vincent Romano standing up from his table. Marie raised an eyebrow. Girl, that man doesn't move unless there's a good reason. You know what people say about him. Sophia did know. She'd heard all the stories, but she'd also seen the way he'd positioned himself between Emma and those men, the quiet authority in his voice, the unexpected gentleness when he'd crouched down to speak to her daughter. He was kind, Sophia said quietly. Whatever else he is, he was kind to us when we needed help. Marie studied her for a long moment, then squeezed her shoulder. Just be careful, honey. Men like that, even when they're helping, it comes with strings attached. Sophia nodded, but her hand drifted to her apron pocket where Vincent's business card rested. She'd memorized the number already, though she hoped she'd never need to use it. The afternoon passed slowly. Emma would be at school for another 2 hours. Then Sophia would pick her up and bring her back to the diner for the evening shift. It was their routine, predictable and safe. Sophia clung to that routine now, needing its familiarity. She was clearing table 6 when her phone buzzed. An unknown number. Sophia's heart rate kicked up as she stepped into the back hallway to answer. Hello? Mrs. Chen, this is Michael. I work for Mr. Romano. The voice was professional, neutral. Mr. Romano asked me to contact you with some information about your situation. Sophia's hand tightened on the phone. What kind of information? We've looked into the debt that was mentioned last night. Without going into specifics over the phone, there are some questions about its legitimacy. Mr. Romano is meeting with the involved party this afternoon to discuss the matter. He doesn't have to do that, Sophia said quickly. I don't want to cause any trouble. Mrs. Chen, the trouble already exists. Mr. Romano is simply addressing it. However, I need to inform you that there will be someone watching over you and your daughter for the next few days. Discreetly. You won't see him, but he'll be there if you need assistance. Sophia didn't know whether to feel relieved or more frightened. Is that really necessary? Mr. Romano believes it is, and I trust his judgment. The man's name is David. A pause. Actually, we'll call him Anthony for this assignment. If you need him, you can call this number and ask for Anthony. Do you understand? Yes, Sophia whispered. Thank you. Please thank Mr. Romano for me. You can thank him yourself when this is resolved. Have a good afternoon, Mrs. Chen. The call ended, and Sophia stood in the hallway, trying to process what had just happened. Vincent Romano had assigned someone to protect them. He was meeting with those men or their boss on her behalf. Why? What did he want from her? But even as the questions swirled, Sophia felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, she and Emma would actually be safe. The meeting location was a restaurant in the financial district. Expensive, public enough to discourage anything unpleasant, but private enough for a serious conversation. Vincent arrived exactly on time, with Tony and Marco flanking him. Marcus Volkov was already seated at a corner table, 2 of his own men standing nearby. Volkov was younger than Vincent by about 10 years, with slicked-back blonde hair and a suit that tried too hard to look expensive. He stood as Vincent approached, extending a hand with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mr. Romano, good of you to meet with me. Vincent shook his hand briefly, then sat down. Tony and Marco took positions that mirrored Volkov's men, close enough to intervene if needed, far enough to maintain the illusion of a cordial meeting. Let's skip the pleasantries, Marcus. Your men approached Sophia Chen in my territory last night. I'd like to know why. Volkov's smile widened slightly. Ah, yes. The widow Chen. I wasn't aware that she was under your protection. My apologies if my associates overstepped. She wasn't under my protection, Vincent said evenly, until last night. Now she is. So, let's discuss this debt you claim she owes. $15,000. Her late husband borrowed from one of my lenders. Very straightforward. Show me the documentation. Volkov's expression flickered, just for a moment, but Vincent caught it. The debt was transacted informally. David Chen preferred to keep things off the books. How convenient, Vincent said. And yet you expect his widow to pay, despite having no proof the debt exists. I have witnesses who can attest. Marcus. Vincent leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping. Let me be very clear about something. I've looked into David Chen's background. I know what he was doing for you before he died. I know this debt is fabricated, and I know why. The pretense of friendliness evaporated from Volkov's face. Careful, Romano. You're making accusations. I'm stating facts. David Chen was feeding you information about shipping routes and cargo manifests. When he became a liability, someone arranged an accident. Now you're using a fake debt to keep his widow scared and isolated, in case she knows something or becomes a problem. It's sloppy, Marcus. Beneath someone who wants to be taken seriously in this city. Volkov's jaw tightened. You're overstepping, Romano. The widow's problems aren't your concern. I've made them my concern. The debt is forgiven. Your men don't approach her again. Not at the diner, not at her home, not on the street. Sophia Chen and her daughter are off limits. Permanently. And if I disagree? Volkov asked, his voice dangerous. Vincent met his gaze steadily. Then we have a much bigger conversation about territorial boundaries and mutual respect. I've been generous with you, Marcus. I've let you operate in areas that border my interest because I believed you were smart enough to show proper courtesy. If I was wrong about that, we can certainly revisit our arrangement. It was a measured threat, delivered without heat or anger. That made it more effective. Volkov knew that Vincent controlled twice the territory he did, had 3 times the resources, and had been doing this since before Volkov arrived in the city. A direct conflict would be expensive at best, disastrous at worst. Volkov was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he sat back in his chair, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. I'm a reasonable man, Romano. If Sophia Chen is important to you, then out of respect for your position, I'll forgive the debt. Consider it a gesture of goodwill between us. I appreciate your understanding, Vincent said, standing. I'm glad we could resolve this amicably. The 2 men shook hands again, and Vincent could feel the barely contained anger in Volkov's grip. This wasn't over. Not really. Volkov would remember this, would see it as a slight to his authority. But for now, Sophia and Emma were safe, and that was what mattered. Vincent walked out of the restaurant with Tony and Marco, saying nothing until they were in the car and pulling into traffic. He's going to be a problem, Tony observed from the driver's seat. Yes, Vincent agreed. But not today. Today we kept our word to a 7-year-old girl. Tomorrow's problems can wait for tomorrow. Sophia picked Emma up from school at 3:15, just like always. Emma chattered about her day. A science project about weather patterns, a game of Foursquare at recess where she'd made it to the finals, a new book the librarian had recommended. Normal, wonderful 7-year-old concerns. As they walked back toward the diner, Sophia found herself glancing around more than usual, looking for threats. For the men from last night, for anything out of place. She didn't see anything unusual, but she also didn't see anyone who might be Anthony, their supposed protector. If he was there, he was good at staying hidden. They were half a block from the diner when Sophia's phone rang, the same unknown number from earlier. Mrs. Chen? This is Michael again. Mr. Romano asked me to inform you that the matter we discussed has been resolved. The debt has been forgiven. Those men won't be approaching you again. Sophia stopped walking, her hand flying to her mouth. It's really over? Yes, ma'am. Mr. Romano was quite clear about that. You and your daughter are safe. Tears sprang to Sophia's eyes. I don't know how to thank him. I don't know how to repay. Mr. Romano doesn't expect repayment, Mrs. Chen. He simply keeps his promises. Have a good evening. The call ended and Sophia stood on the sidewalk, crying openly now. Emma tugged at her hand, worried. Mommy? Why are you crying? Are you sad? No, baby. Sophia managed, wiping her eyes and laughing at the same time. I'm happy. Really, really happy. The bad men aren't going to bother us anymore. We're safe. Emma's face lit up with relief, and she threw her arms around her mother's waist. Sophia held her daughter close, right there on the busy sidewalk, and felt like she could breathe fully for the first time in 2 years. That evening, Vincent returned to the diner at his usual time, 8:30, on the dot. Sophia saw him enter and felt her breath catch. She'd been thinking all afternoon about what she would say to him, how she could possibly express her gratitude. She approached his table with a coffee pot and a cup, her hands steadier than they'd been in days. Mr. Romano, your usual? Please. And Sophia? He looked up at her, and his expression was softer than she'd expected. You don't owe me anything. I want you to know that. I know, Sophia said quietly, but I'm grateful anyway. What you did, what you're doing, it means everything to me and Emma. Vincent nodded, then glanced over to where Emma sat in her usual corner booth, working on her homework. The little girl looked up, saw him, and waved enthusiastically. Vincent raised his hand in a small wave back, and something that might have been a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. She's a brave kid, Vincent said. Takes after her mother, I think. Sophia felt her cheeks warm. I don't feel very brave most of the time. I feel like I'm barely holding everything together. That's what bravery is, Vincent replied. Holding things together when they're falling apart. You're doing better than you think. Sophia didn't know what to say to that, so she simply poured his coffee and went to get his pie. When she returned, Vincent was looking out the window at the rain that had started falling again, his expression distant. "Mr. Romano, can I ask you something?" "Vincent," he corrected gently. "And yes, why did you help us? You didn't know us. You didn't owe us anything." Vincent was quiet for a moment, then turned to look directly at her. "I had a daughter once. She would have been about Emma's age. When your daughter grabbed my hand last night, it reminded me that there are still things worth protecting in this world. That's reason enough." The grief in his voice was barely concealed, and Sophia's heart ached for him. "I'm so sorry for your loss. Thank you. And Sophia, if you ever need anything, if Emma needs anything, you use that number I gave you. Understood?" "I will. Thank you, Vincent." She returned to her work, but throughout the evening she found herself glancing at Vincent's table. He sat there for an hour, drinking his coffee, eating his pie, watching the rain. When he finally left, he stopped by Emma's booth. "Good night, Emma. Stay out of trouble." "I will. Good night, Mr. Vincent." Sophia watched him leave, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt like maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay. She didn't know that in a penthouse across the city, Marcus Volkov was making plans of his own. She didn't know that Vincent's protection would soon be tested in ways none of them expected. But for tonight, for this moment, Sophia and Emma were safe, and that was enough. 3 weeks passed with a strange, fragile peace. Sophia fell back into her routine. Morning shift at the diner, picking Emma up from school, evening shift until close. But now there were small differences. Vincent came every Thursday without fail, always at 8:30, always ordering the same thing. Sometimes he and Sophia exchanged a few words. Sometimes he simply nodded and returned to watching the rain or reading the newspaper. Emma had grown comfortable with his presence. She'd wave when he arrived, and occasionally, when her homework proved particularly challenging, Vincent would glance over and offer a hint, never the full answer, just enough to nudge her thinking in the right direction. "He's nice," Emma announced one evening as Sophia tucked her into bed. "Mr. Vincent, he's like a grumpy teddy bear." Sophia had laughed at that description. "I don't think anyone's ever called Vincent Romano a teddy bear before, sweetheart." "Well, he is. He pretends to be all serious, but he's not really. Not on the inside." Children saw things adults missed, Sophia thought. They saw past the expensive suits and the reputation to something more fundamental. Emma saw kindness where others saw danger, but Sophia wasn't naive enough to believe the danger had disappeared entirely. She still caught glimpses of Anthony, or whatever his real name was, the man Vincent had assigned to watch over them, a figure across the street when she left for work, a car that seemed to follow the same route she took to pick up Emma. He was good at blending in, but once Sophia knew to look for him, she could spot the signs. It should have felt invasive, being watched like that. Instead, it felt safe. Vincent sat in his office reviewing quarterly reports when Michael knocked and entered without waiting for permission. That alone told Vincent the news wasn't good. "We have a problem," Michael said, setting a file on Vincent's desk. "Marcus Volkov has been making moves. Quiet ones, but significant." Vincent opened the file, scanning the surveillance photos and documented meetings. Volkov had been reaching out to other organizations, forming alliances, building a coalition. The message was clear. He was preparing for something. "He's not over what happened with Sophia Chen," Vincent observed. "No, sir. And he's using it as leverage with the other families, claiming you're going soft, that you let personal feelings interfere with business. He's suggesting that if you'll back down over one woman and a child, you might back down over other things too." Vincent's jaw tightened. He'd known this might happen, had weighed the consequences when he decided to protect Sophia. But knowing and experiencing were different things. What's his endgame? From what we can tell, he wants to force a confrontation, make you look weak either way. If you fight, you're the aggressor starting trouble over nothing. If you don't fight, you're weak. Either way, he damages your reputation and strengthens his own position. It was clever strategy, Vincent had to admit. Volkov had turned a simple act of protection into a political problem. What about Sophia? Is she still safe? Anthony reports no attempts to approach her. Volkov's keeping his distance there, probably because he knows that's where you draw the line. But boss, Michael hesitated. If this escalates, she could still become a target. Not directly, but as leverage. Vincent stood and walked to the window, his mind working through scenarios. He'd built his position on being 3 steps ahead of everyone else, on anticipating problems before they materialized. This situation required careful navigation. Double the watch on Sophia and Emma. I want someone on them 24/7. And set up a meeting with the other family heads. It's time to remind everyone how things work in this city. Yes, sir. And if Volkov pushes anyway? Vincent's expression hardened. Then we respond appropriately, but not until we've exhausted every other option. I won't start a conflict that could put innocent people at risk. After Michael left, Vincent remained at the window looking out over the city. Somewhere out there, Sophia was probably working her evening shift. Emma was doing homework in a corner booth, and neither of them knew they'd become pieces on a chessboard they hadn't asked to be part of. He thought about walking away, removing his protection, letting Sophia fend for herself, eliminating the complication. It would be the logical choice, the safe choice. But then he remembered Emma's small hand in his, her absolute trust, and he knew he couldn't do it. Whatever consequences came from this decision, he'd face them. He'd given his word to a 7-year-old child, and Vincent Romano always kept his word. Sophia noticed the change before she consciously understood what she was seeing. There were more watchful eyes around the diner now. Men who sat in cars across the street for hours. Different faces, but always someone there. Anthony had been joined by others. Marie noticed, too. You've got yourself some serious protection, girl. What exactly did you do to earn Vincent Romano's full attention? Nothing, Sophia insisted. He's just being kind. But she couldn't shake the growing unease. The protection felt heavier now, less like a safety net, and more like a barrier between her and the normal world. Customers at the diner were treating her differently. Some with newfound respect, others with fear, a few with resentment. Word had spread that she was under Vincent's protection, and that came with implications she didn't fully understand. Thursday evening arrived, and Sophia found herself watching the clock more anxiously than usual. 8:30 came and went. Vincent didn't appear. By 9 o'clock, Sophia's worry had crystallized into genuine fear. Vincent was never late. He came every Thursday at exactly 8:30, had done so for months. His absence felt wrong, like a missed heartbeat. She was refilling coffee at table 3 when her phone buzzed. An unknown number, but she'd learned to recognize the pattern by now. It would be Michael or someone else from Vincent's organization. Sophia stepped into the back hallway. Hello? Mrs. Chen, this is Michael. Mr. Romano asked me to call and let you know he won't be able to make his usual visit tonight. He has other business that requires his attention. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by embarrassment. Why had she been so worried? Vincent didn't owe her his presence. Their arrangement was protection, not friendship. Thank you for letting me know, Sophia said. I hope everything's all right. Everything's fine, Mrs. Chen. He simply wanted to ensure you wouldn't be concerned by his absence. The call ended, but Sophia stood in the hallway for a moment longer, processing the fact that Vincent had thought to call, that he'd anticipated she might worry and had taken steps to reassure her. It was such a small thing, but it spoke to a level of consideration she hadn't expected. You okay? Marie asked, poking her head around the corner. Yeah, Sophia said, managing a smile. Yeah, I'm fine. But as she returned to work, Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. The protection wasn't just about keeping her safe anymore. Somehow, without quite meaning to, she and Vincent had developed something that looked almost like friendship. The meeting of the family heads took place in a private room at an upscale restaurant downtown. 5 men sat around an oval table. Vincent, representing the largest territory, and 4 others who controlled smaller but significant portions of the city's underground economy. Marcus Volkov sat at the far end, his expression carefully neutral. Vincent had called the meeting, which meant he controlled the agenda. He waited until everyone had settled with their drinks before speaking. Gentlemen, thank you for coming. I've called this meeting because it's come to my attention that there's been some confusion about territorial boundaries and proper protocols. I thought it best to address this directly, rather than allow misunderstandings to escalate. Thomas Castellano, the oldest of the family heads, nodded. Always better to talk than to take action. What's the concern, Vincent? Vincent's gaze moved to Volkov. Marcus has been making inquiries, forming alliances, suggesting that I've become unreliable. I wanted to hear his concerns directly and give him the opportunity to explain his position. All eyes turned to Volkov. The younger man sat back in his chair, a slight smile playing at his lips. No concerns, Vincent, simply business. I've been establishing relationships, as anyone in my position would. If you've interpreted that as something more, perhaps that says more about your state of mind than my intentions. It was a calculated insult, delivered with enough polish to maintain deniability. Vincent remained calm, his expression unchanged. Let me be clear about something, Marcus. 3 weeks ago you attempted to collect a fabricated debt from a woman under false pretenses. When I intervened, you backed down. That was the right decision. But since then, you've been suggesting to anyone who'll listen that my intervention was a sign of weakness. Was it not? Volkov asked, his smile widening. You risked your reputation, your standing, for what? A waitress and her child? People are asking questions, Vincent. They're wondering if you've lost focus. People, Vincent said quietly, should remember that I've held my position for 15 years through careful judgment and measured responses. I don't act impulsively, Marcus. When I choose to protect someone, I do so for reasons that serve my broader interests. If you can't see those reasons, that's a limitation of your perspective, not a flaw in my strategy. Roberto Santos, another family head, cleared his throat. Vincent, I think what Marcus is trying to say, perhaps inelegantly, is that your actions created questions about precedent. If you'll go to such lengths for one person, what does that mean for how we all conduct business? It means, Vincent said, that I don't tolerate people operating in my territory without proper authorization. It means I don't accept fabricated debts and intimidation tactics, especially when they target people who have no connection to our world. Sophia Chen is a civilian. Her late husband created problems, but she had no part in them. Targeting her was inappropriate, and I responded accordingly. By putting her under full protection, Volkov interjected, by assigning multiple men to watch her constantly, by threatening anyone who comes near her. That's not a measured response, Vincent. That's personal. The word hung in the air. Personal. It was the accusation that carried the most weight in their world. Personal feelings led to poor decisions, to vulnerabilities that could be exploited. Vincent met Volkov's gaze steadily. Yes, Marcus, it is personal. I made a promise to a child and I keep my promises. If that's seen as a weakness in your eyes, then we simply have different values. I can live with that. Can you? The challenge was subtle, but unmistakable. Vincent was drawing a line. Either Volkov could accept his decision and move on, or they could escalate this into something neither of them truly wanted. Castellano spoke again, his voice carrying the weight of experience. Marcus, I've known Vincent for 20 years. I've seen him make decisions that seemed questionable at the time but proved wise in retrospect. If he says there are broader reasons for his actions, I'm inclined to trust his judgment. And honestly, protecting a woman and child from harassment isn't exactly controversial. It's decent behavior. The other family heads nodded in agreement. Volkov's expression tightened. He'd hoped for more support, for validation that Vincent had overstepped. Instead, he was being isolated. Of course, Volkov said, his tone smooth again despite the tension in his jaw. I meant no disrespect, Vincent. I was simply seeking clarification on the situation. If the matter is closed, then I have no further concerns. The matter is closed, Vincent confirmed. Sophia Chen remains under my protection. No one approaches her, no one threatens her, no one uses her as leverage for any purpose. That's not negotiable. Are we clear? Murmurs of agreement circled the table. Volkov nodded, though his eyes promised this wasn't truly over. The meeting continued for another hour, covering other business, territorial adjustments, shared concerns about law enforcement activities. But the real business had been concluded in those first 15 minutes. Vincent had made his position clear, had rallied the other families to his side, and had isolated Volkov politically. It was a victory, but Vincent knew it was temporary. Men like Volkov didn't forget slights. They waited, they planned, and eventually they struck back. It was nearly 11 when Vincent finally made it to Rosie's diner. The place was almost empty, just Mr. Peterson reading his paper, and a young woman Sophia didn't recognize nursing a cup of coffee in the back booth. Sophia was wiping down tables when the door chimed. She looked up, surprised to see Vincent entering so late. I know I missed my usual time, Vincent said as he approached. But I wanted to stop by anyway, is that all right? Of course, Sophia said, grabbing a menu even though she knew he wouldn't need it. Coffee and pie? Just coffee tonight. And Sophia, do you have a few minutes to talk? The serious tone in his voice made Sophia's stomach clench with worry. Sure. Let me just tell Jimmy I'm taking a break. She poured 2 cups of coffee and slid into the booth across from Vincent. Emma had fallen asleep in her usual corner booth an hour ago, her library book still open beside her. Sophia had covered her daughter with her jacket and let her rest. "Is something wrong?" Sophia asked quietly. Vincent wrapped his hands around the coffee cup, studying the dark liquid as if it held answers. "I want to be honest with you about something. The protection I've been providing, it's created complications. There's someone who isn't happy about my involvement in your situation, and he's been making moves to challenge my authority." Sophia felt her heart rate pick up. "Because of me? Because of his ego and ambition. You're just the excuse he's using." Vincent looked up, meeting her eyes. "I've handled it for now, politically. He won't come after you directly, but things might get more complicated before they get simpler, and I wanted you to know that. I wanted you to understand that the protection stays in place no matter what." "Vincent, if I'm causing you problems—" "You're not causing anything," Vincent interrupted gently. "I made a choice I'd make again, without hesitation. But I believe in being honest with the people I protect. You deserve to know what's happening." Sophia was quiet for a moment, processing. "Can I ask you something? Why does this matter so much to you? I know you lost your daughter and I'm so sorry for that, but there must be dozens of people who need help. Why us?" Vincent's expression softened, and for just a moment, Sophia glimpsed the grief that lived beneath his controlled exterior. "My daughter's name was Isabella. She loved to draw, especially animals. She'd sit for hours with her sketchbook, completely absorbed in creating these elaborate pictures of horses and dolphins and birds." He pulled out his wallet and extracted a small photo, a little girl with dark curls and a brilliant smile, holding up a drawing for the camera. "She was beautiful," Sophia whispered. "She was everything. And when she got sick, when we realized the treatment wasn't working, all I could think about was how unfair it was. She was innocent, pure, good. She deserved a full life and she was being robbed of it. I would have done anything to save her. I would have burned down the world." Vincent carefully tucked the photo back into his wallet. "But there was nothing I could do. All my power, all my resources, and I couldn't save my own daughter. She died, and part of me died with her. I stopped caring about much of anything after that. Until Emma grabbed your hand," Sophia said softly. "Until Emma grabbed my hand," Vincent confirmed. "And suddenly I could do something. I could protect someone's daughter, keep her safe, give her the chance to grow up that Isabella never got. It matters because I can make it matter. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Sophia said, tears welling in her eyes. "And I want you to know, Emma talks about you all the time. She calls you her friend. You've given her something precious too, Vincent. You've shown her that there are people in the world who keep their promises, who help when help is needed. That's a gift." Vincent glanced over at where Emma slept, her small form peaceful and safe. "She's a special kid. You're raising her well." "I'm trying. It's not always easy, but I try." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, drinking their coffee. Outside, the city hummed with late-night activity, but inside the diner felt like a small island of calm. "Sophia, I need you to promise me something," Vincent said finally. "If anything feels wrong, if you see anything suspicious, if anyone approaches you or Emma, you call immediately. Don't wait. Don't try to handle it yourself. Just call." "I promise," Sophia said. "But Vincent, you have to promise me something too. Don't take unnecessary risks because of us. We're grateful for your protection, but not if it puts you in danger." Vincent's lips quirked in something that wasn't quite a smile. "I appreciate the concern, but I've been navigating dangerous situations since before you were born. I know how to protect myself. I'm sure you do, but everyone needs someone to worry about them. Even you." The words seemed to catch Vincent off guard. He studied Sophia for a long moment, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. "When this is all over," he said quietly, "when things settle down and the protection isn't necessary anymore, I'd like to still visit, if that's all right. Not as protection, just as, well, as friends maybe." Sophia felt warmth bloom in her chest. "I'd like that very much. Emma would be thrilled. And you?" "Me too," Sophia admitted. "You're not what I expected, Vincent Romano. You're better." Vincent stood, leaving money on the table for the coffee. "I should go. Get Emma home and both of you get some rest. I'll be in touch soon. Good night, Vincent. And thank you for everything." As Vincent left the diner, Sophia remained in the booth, cradling her coffee cup and thinking about the strange turns life could take. 3 weeks ago, she'd been terrified, alone, facing an impossible debt. Now she had the protection of one of the most powerful men in the city. And more surprisingly, she had something that felt like genuine friendship. She went to wake Emma, gently shaking her daughter's shoulder. "Come on, baby. Time to go home." Emma stirred, blinking sleepily. "Did Mr. Vincent come?" "He did. He asked about you. Wanted to make sure you were doing okay." "I like him, Mommy. He makes us safe." "Yes, sweetheart. He does." As they walked home through the quiet streets, Sophia noticed the car following at a discreet distance, Anthony or one of the others making sure they arrived safely. The protection that had once felt strange now felt like a security blanket, a buffer between her family and the dangers of the world. But deep in her heart, Sophia knew that Vincent had been right. Things would get more complicated before they got simpler. And when that happened, they'd all need to be ready. 2 months had passed since the meeting of the family heads, and an uneasy equilibrium had settled over the city. Vincent maintained his protection of Sophia and Emma. Marcus Volkov kept his distance, and life continued in its careful balance, until the Tuesday morning when everything changed. Sophia was opening the diner for the early shift when her phone rang. Michael's voice was urgent. "Mrs. Chen, we have a situation. Volkov's men were spotted near Emma's school. We've increased security, but Mr. Romano wants you to keep Emma home today. He's coming to speak with you personally." Fear spiked through Sophia's chest. "Is she in danger?" "We're being cautious. Stay at your apartment. Anthony is outside your building. Mr. Romano will be there within the hour." Sophia called the school, her hands shaking as she explained Emma was sick. Emma, sensing her mother's anxiety, stayed quiet, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Vincent arrived exactly when Michael said he would, his expression grim. "Volkov's making his move. Not directly. He's too smart for that. But he's applying pressure, testing boundaries." "What does he want?" Sophia asked, though she already knew the answer. "He wants me to back down. To remove my protection and prove I won't risk conflict over you and Emma." Vincent's jaw tightened. "That's not going to happen." Over the next 3 days, Vincent orchestrated a careful campaign. He met with law enforcement contacts, calling in favors to have Volkov's operation scrutinized. He reached out to the other family heads, reminding them of the agreements they'd made. He positioned his own people strategically, creating a network of protection so comprehensive that Volkov would have to start an all-out conflict to breach it. The gamble worked. Facing united opposition from the other families and increased attention from law enforcement, Volkov had no choice but to retreat. At a tense meeting on Friday evening, he formally agreed to cease all activities related to Sophia Chen and her family. But the victory came at a cost. Vincent had accumulated debts to other families, owed favors that would take years to repay. His resources had been stretched thin. Most significantly, he'd revealed just how much Sophia and Emma mattered to him, a vulnerability that couldn't be hidden anymore. 3 months later, on a warm spring evening, Sophia stood outside the courthouse with Emma beside her. She'd testified that morning about David's activities, providing information that helped authorities close several cases. Vincent's lawyers had ensured her protection throughout the process, and now it was finally over. "Is it really done, Mommy?" Emma asked, squinting up at her in the afternoon sun. "Yes, baby, it's really done. No more scary men, no more debts. Just us, starting fresh." Sophia had given her notice at the diner the week before. With the legal settlement from providing testimony, she'd have enough to go back to school, to pursue the accounting degree she'd abandoned when she got pregnant with Emma. A new job, a new apartment in a better neighborhood, a new beginning. Vincent had arranged all of it, but he'd done so quietly, through intermediaries, never asking for recognition or gratitude. 2 weeks later, Sophia and Emma sat in the audience of Emma's school auditorium, watching the 3rd grade production of Charlotte's Web. Emma had a small part as one of the sheep, and she'd been practicing her single line for weeks. Sophia was watching Emma on stage when she sensed someone settling into the empty seat beside her. She turned, surprised to see Vincent, looking slightly uncomfortable in the small auditorium chair. "You came," Sophia whispered. "She invited me," Vincent replied softly. Seemed important to her. On stage, Emma delivered her line perfectly, and both Vincent and Sophia clapped enthusiastically. Emma spotted them in the audience, and her face lit up with joy. After the performance, Emma ran to them, still wearing her sheep costume. "Mr. Vincent, you came. Did you see me?" "I saw you. You were excellent," Vincent said, and the genuine warmth in his voice made Sophia's heart squeeze. Emma hugged Vincent around the waist, unselfconscious and trusting. Vincent's hand came up to rest gently on her head, and Sophia saw emotion flicker across his face. "Thank you for coming," Emma said. It meant a lot. Thank you for inviting me, Vincent replied. As other parents and children swirled around them, Sophia stood beside Vincent watching Emma chatter excitedly about the performance. This man had risked everything to keep them safe. He'd paid a price she couldn't fully comprehend, and he'd done it all because a 7-year-old girl had grabbed his hand and asked for help. Vincent, Sophia said quietly, what you've done for us gave me something I thought I'd lost. Vincent interrupted gently. Purpose, connection, a reason to be more than what I'd become. If anything, I should be thanking you both. They walked out of the school together, Emma between them, holding both their hands. Vincent's car was parked down the street, and Sophia knew he'd drive away soon, return to his world of complicated politics and dangerous balances. But for now, in this moment, they were just 3 people who'd found each other in unexpected circumstances and had somehow become something like a family. Will you still come to the diner? Emma asked as they reached Vincent's car. Even though we're moving? Vincent knelt down to Emma's level. I'll come visit wherever you are, if your mother says it's all right. Is that okay with you, Sophia? More than okay, Sophia said, her voice thick with emotion. You're always welcome, Vincent. Always. Vincent stood, his eyes meeting Sophia's over Emma's head. There was understanding there and something deeper, a connection forged in crisis but built on genuine care. Then I'll see you both soon, Vincent said. He touched Emma's shoulder gently, nodded to Sophia, and climbed into his car. As they watched him drive away, Emma leaned against her mother. He's not really a grumpy teddy bear, Mommy. He's just a teddy bear. Sophia laughed, wiping her eyes. You're absolutely right, sweetheart. They walked home through the spring evening, mother and daughter, safe and free and looking toward a future that finally felt bright with possibility. Behind them, a black car followed at a discreet distance. Anthony, still watching, still protecting, because Vincent Romano always kept his promises. Even after the danger had passed, even when protection became something more like friendship, even when a waitress's daughter and her mother had somehow found their way into the guarded heart of a man who'd thought he could never care again.